Dad, why do you want to talk about challenges? Why don't you give some solution? Why don't you talk about solutions to the whatever problems that you have? Uh, it did it did make me think a bit, but truly there are so many challenges now that we are all struggling. We are all working around to find solutions. So I will present here today the challenges for ship designers as we try to design for the future. So in this presentation, I have kept a brief background of what we are, then an introduction about the topic. Then I will briefly talk about the ship design spiral. Then I have taken some key aspects like hull form design, structural design, and machinery and system designs. And then briefly touch upon the going digital part of the industry as a whole and ship design in specific. And I will try to present a conclusion what I have. So we said Smart Engineering and Design Solution was established in 2007 by the promoters of GTR Campbell Marine Consultants. GTRC and us, our group of companies, are about 80 years old in the industry and have developed and constructed almost 600 ships at various shipyards in Japan, China, and Korea, and India. And one of the GTRC's designs, Freedom Class, was used by the Japanese shipyards for perfecting their series construction and design optimization process. So we are tuned to designing for standard production and series construction. And sets from its inception have been working on different ship designs, ranging from patrol vessels for the Coast Guard to bulk carriers, passenger vessels, and presently working on defense corvette design with Cochin Shipyard. When we come to the present day topic, as many presenters have explained, the industry is in a transition phase. It's we all see the 2050 big target that is kept, and there are many new aspects that are coming to the industry, and most of the decisions are being driven by reduction in material, reduction in energy usage and consumption, and reduction in pollution. So each and every of the decisions are being kind of driven by this aspect. And when we talk about material, we talk about new development of new material, lighter construction material, fabrication material, insulation, different material. And when it comes to energy, it is a whole spectrum of topics that we are talking about, starting from the usage of fuel on board, even the fuel that is used for constructing, the electricity that is used for constructing, and in all aspects. And pollution, as we all know, is probably in the driving seat of many of the decisions at this point, with everybody wanting to cut down on the carbon emission and other sulfur and nitrous oxide emissions. In this particular aspect, we see a lot of work happening. For example, in carbon capture industry, there are at least 6 or 7 major projects running, actual practical project application running in parallel. Even application of nuclear energy on commercial vessels, we see quite interesting studies happening, which can completely change the way we actually even look at the market, because right now your reduction in pollution, reducing energy consumption is always linked to your reducing the weight of the vessel and optimizing the hull form and things like that. But when it comes to an energy surplus situation where you have sufficient energy, you can really concentrate on other aspects and just use energy as it is available. So nuclear definitely stand a good chance with the kind of development that are happening. And as I said, in this presentation, I will present the key challenges when the industry, key challenges being faced by the designers when the industry try to focus on this three major aspects of reduction of material, energy, and pollution. I will start with the conventional design spiral and will discuss the changes. And for general purpose, I have taken the design of a bulk carrier as a sample to explain certain aspects which are somewhat applicable to different other kind of vessels. Here you can see this is a very standard diagram that anybody who might have studied something connected to ship design or marine engineering might have seen. This is a 1959 diagram, and why I kept it is, in fact, this has been like this for, I would say, even a couple of years before, till a couple of years before. We start with mission requirement, we start developing lines plan and main particulars, where a lot of legacy experience was used, the experience accumulated by designing similar vessels or operating similar vessels. And then from there, we used to go to design of arrangement, structure, powering, estimation of light ship weight, capacities, cost estimate, and it used to go in spirals till we reach this final design that is required. Now, I am taking some aspects of it, and we'll try to discuss a bit more on how these changes that we are seeing are affecting this spiral. In fact, this is a very important aspect of any ship design and shipbuilding process, because a standard shipbuilding schedule will reserve some time for design, and that's what the industry is tuned for. And when as designers we try to meet this or try to incorporate the new technologies, new concept, new regulations, this spiral doesn't work this way just like that. It kind of develops a lot of small spirals for each of these key aspects that I've mentioned here. Let's just look at the hull form design, which you can all imagine for any ship, what we see from outside. And what is there below the water. It defines how much cargo it can carry, what will be the fuel consumption for that vessel, what kind of stability that the vessel will have, many aspects of that. Now, so always say we need to start a design. An owner wants to carry a certain amount of cargo, and there are different segments of designs, which, as you all know, Handysize, Handymax, Panamax. So for each of these designs, there are standard main particulars or ship's key parameters, which have kind of become industry standards because of port draft limitation or the port handling capabilities, many things. So if I take a Handysize vessel, it's largely 180 meter in length and maybe around 30 meter beam. And everybody had MGO or HFO as fuel. And now I have to think about which fuel I will use. You can see in the table, we have started to see different fuel options. I have taken here 4 potential fuels: LNG, methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen. And in the last column, you can see what equivalent volume is required on board to have similar energy content in the fuel as MGO. For example, 1,000 cubic meter of MGO would require about 2,300 cubic meters of methanol, or if it is ammonia, about 3,120 cubic meter. And it's not just that. Each of these new fuel or future fuel comes with much more requirements of, let's say, having cofferdam or insulation or certain protection arrangement, which simply adds to the volume requirement of this fuel on board. In addition, you can also see the first column, which says what is the energy content per kilogram for these fuels. If MGO has 42.7 megajoules per kilogram, methanol has only 19.9 and ammonia has 18.6. That means the weight of the fuel that we have to carry on ship to have similar energy content or similar endurance, we convert it into more understanding terminology, we would need more weight of fuel to be carried. And this fuel has to be carried somewhat closer to where you are keeping the engine room. For example, this is like a conventional vessel. This is an LNG carrier design. I've just kept the top view just to show for a bulk carrier, there are so many aspects that we have to consider, from safety, cargo operation, and many other things. And this is one of our designs where we try to keep the LNG in the aft. You can directly think when we try to keep that much weight in the aft, the whole design of hull form has to be relooked, because you cannot have larger trim. So probably you start adjusting your center of buoyancy, you start changing your distribution of weight, and you start working on a new hull form depending on what fuel you're taking. And each of this fuel have very large variation. It's not like MGO and HFO. Each of the fuel, if LNG is LNG need 1,600 cubic meter, ammonia requires 3,100 cubic meter. So another, of course, another aspect will be, we again discuss what kind of endurance that the design should have. So if a ship owner is expecting similar kind of endurance what he has from MGO, it will be quite a challenge. And an alternative maybe go for lower fuel on board and then manage with the operation. But these are all things which have to be discussed, which were not really discussed during this time of the design, this phase of the design. And when it comes to the performance, typically we used to design the hull, design the ship, and kind of predict the what power the ship will require for calm water. When we say calm water, it is ideal. It is what you do the model test for. You really see there is no wind, no wave, and then you define the power and you add a C margin to it. So it typically it has been 15%. So you keep the C margin and then you define your service power requirement, or CSR power, that we all see on vessel specifications. Now, as we go forward, when the vessels are being assessed for their annual operation performance, annual carbon emission, people would like to see how the vessel really perform in the expected operational area. If a vessel is specifically designed to operate between Australia and China, you can actually design it more suitable for that area of operation with the present tools and present thought process that the industry has. And at this stage, I've actually kept a couple of screenshots of CFD, where 10 years before, if we had to do a CFD with actual propeller rotating and actual energy saving devices model, it would have taken too much time and too much complexities, which has largely changed now due to a lot of incorporation of AI and machine learning into the system, the working process of the tools. And this can be employed in the design process. However, this takes much more time than what we normally do with typical kind of design development. And another key factor which has been in the industry for some time now, there are IMO guidelines available, is noise, not just the internal noise, but the underwater noise. It's quite an interesting topic. As designers, like we are used to see this in defense vessels where there are very stringent underwater noise limits. But for cargo vessels, when especially connected to marine mammal life and marine, a part of marine pollution is noise pollution. And when we think about that, there are so many things that are to be done at early stages of design. One of the major component of the ship noise is cavitation, which is connected to the smooth flow and proper flow to the propeller. So starting from there to the pressure pulses that will be generated on the hull by cavitation is to be studied at an early stage. What I have kept here is one of the studies that we did, where the pressure pulses on the bottom of the stern was studied, and we try to limit it in the range of 3 to 5 kilopascals. to have reasonable noise limit, but it's just a general guideline. There are so many other aspects to be looked into when we design the hull, when we design the mounting of machinery, when we design the pipe supports, when we design various HVAC systems and things like that. It's quite an interesting topic and a large topic on its own. And the other key aspect are kind of the interest to tap into wind and wave. I've kept an image which I took from one of the DNVGL presentation. You can see when there are these kind of projected area on top, presently the industry is looking at it probably as a retrofit option, but when we actually design for predominant use of with thrust from the wind, the whole design concept has to change, because you will have to make it more slender. You need to have a better stability studies done for various operational condition of the vessel, and also how you distribute your power between your main engine and this whatever are these associated or assisting unit, so that you have sufficient maneuvering capabilities in port and things like that. So all these discussions have to happen much early in the design, which are kind of completely new. And when it comes to the structure design, you can see I've again kept a typical case of LNG, but it can be very similar when it comes to ammonia or even methanol, especially for bulk carriers, where you really don't want to consume your cargo cubic, because that's what earns for you. So when you start designing, you say we have certain bending moments to be considered, and directly you're adding a lot of weight towards the end. You are designing a vessel with more design bending moment, and in addition to that, there are more requirements of you can imagine a large volume of fuel moving with the vessel in different operational condition, and so we have to study more on sloshing, more on associated vibration, and even when we carry the cryogenic fuels, how you study the temperature gradient and the boil off gas connection to that, and many aspects like that. So it's definitely interesting, but it's each of them is quite challenging, because these are not normal skills that a typical design company keeps with them. One option is, of course, you start learning everything and you try to have a team, or another one would be, of course, more and more collaboration, which looks like the way for the industry as we move forward. Here I have kept a graph for vibration studies, because when there are more sources of imbalance on a ship, at a very early stage of design, you have to make sure that you don't have any part of your structure resonating with any of these disturbing forces. This was not a big issue before, because most of the vessels were designed with a lot of legacy experience, lot of understanding of the design. So you knew that, okay, if you don't largely move away from standard, you will be safe. But now it can be hugely different, because problems like vibration, if you find really at the sea trial, you really have a tough nut to crack. Yeah, I will skip this. And when it comes to machinery and system design, I have just taken 3 scenarios of methanol, LNG, and ammonia to briefly explain. In fact, we have kept one case where an exoskeleton structure is built on the aft of the vessel, where you can have a GTT type membrane tank for LNG and ammonia, and you can even have a methanol independent tank kept at the aft like this. But you can already see that you need to have a split funnel, and when you start splitting the funnel, you need to see what kind of exhaust gas treatment that you use for your nitrous oxides. So if you have SCRs, you have to segregate your SCRs. You have to segregate your different exhaust lines and different components into these different funnels. And from that point, we start shifting the or we start moving away from the typical engine room that we see on these kind of ships. And you can very well imagine you cannot have a vertical boiler kept here. So probably we were thinking of shifting the boiler to the second deck and having a horizontal boiler with a separate economizer. And so the whole process of design has to kind of take a different route depending on what fuel you want to take. And at this point, the most difficult part or most interesting part that we see is nobody's clear of what should be done. So we try to design ship which can do whatever it comes, which is quite a large band to work with. And there are for all these fuels, there are more fuel handling systems, and there are more systems to manage, say, a boil of gas. So if you can go for a cryo cooler to cool the boil of gas in certain systems, or you want to have some different gas consumer, you can go for that. The bunkering has to be seen completely different. It's the position, the relative positioning compared to accommodation and machinery system, everything has to be seen. And then you have relatively large fuel gas or fuel preparation room before it can be directed to the engine, which takes in more space. And when it takes in more space, you're actually moving away from the conventional accommodation arrangement that you can have on these kind of cargo vessels. Accommodation in general, when we look at this aft part, you can see we need more space for the fuel. We need more space which can earn for the fuel and which can propel the fuel. So when we try to squeeze the accommodation space and probably make it more slender, we are also making it more prone to associated vibration and related issues. So the kind of studies that has to go in at a very early stage to ensure that this kind of problems will not come up at later stages is very important. And also there are key issues which of course I have not gone into details of how each of these fuels can be incorporated. But one typical example is, where you keep the vent mast for LNG or ammonia. It has to be certain meters away from your air intake, and there are many specific requirements that you have to see, which are quite iterative and which also require a lot of discussion between suppliers, equipment suppliers, the classification societies, the flag state. In fact, when we did the first LNG fuel bulk carrier design, we had to discuss directly with the US Coast Guard, because it was not clear how they will treat an LNG fuel vessel in US waters. So when each of these new fuels and new technology come into the ship and we try to incorporate them to the ship, we will have to take into confidence a wide range of interested parties in our early stage discussions. And going digital, of course, this transformation of design from desktop, working on papers, I think it happened quite long before. Now, what I have kept here is one of the designs where you start with your hull form development, CFD, your 3D model, your FE analysis. So you do the entire thing, but now we will have to go to the next step, because the shipbuilding industry as such is trying to move to this industry 4 concept of more integrated design and engineering process, where there are a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. The VR, in fact, most of the design tools that we use have incorporated VR into their design philosophy. So it's more easy for the customer to see what is there and to feel, or kind of feel, what is in the design. And in fact, we can have the ship built in the computer, on the drawing board, with much more details if when we start collaborating with various stakeholders and define the kind of digital twin at a very early stage, which can be used by the ship yard and as well as ship's end user for construction and maintenance aspects of the vessel. So just to conclude, as we have seen, the industry is going through a huge transition phase with a clear focus on reduction in material, energy, and pollution. The ship design approach has changed drastically from legacy experience-based design process, and the emerging design process demands much higher degree of collaboration between various stakeholders and the industry. So thank you so much. I'm ready to take any questions if you have.
Thank you, Hariraj. That was again a very detailed explanation on what the new naval architects challenges are. Could you please post your questions in the Q&A box so that we can address them? I would like to begin with something that one of the participants had raised with Sandit's presentation, where they were asking about how should a new naval architect, approach the industry. From what you are saying now, there seems to be a very interesting and lucrative future for naval architects, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to meet all the design requirements.
Yes, definitely yes. It's quite an interesting phase, and I think when you look at many of these aspects, anybody in the industry who has been in the industry for quite some time is kind of same as a newcomer to the industry. And in fact, I feel as students, they have more flexibility and more opportunity to learn more, because they really don't have actual work to do. They can prepare themselves better. And nowadays, the information availability is much more. Your access to information and access to education is even better. So everybody will have to develop understanding on data, processing data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and even the engineering. The kind of changes that we are seeing in the usage of tools, the CFD tools. For example, in 10 years before, even when we go to a reputed model basin like Maren in Netherlands, they used to take almost 1.5 days to do one run of a viscous flow calculation. Okay, one of the CFD calculation, which is done in minutes now, even for us. So the capacity has changed drastically. So as universities and colleges, they have to try to make the student as suitable to the industry as possible. And I think that initiative will have to come from the student side. And we try to provide internship to the maximum people as much as possible, so that we can at least tell them, okay, this is what we are doing. This is what we would expect from you when you come out from the college. So start preparing. So I think they have to interact with, there are a lot of companies in India who are doing different things, and of course from the different part of the world. So they should start interacting, understand what they have to do. The opportunities are a lot. So that's I think what I have to say.
Thank you. The next question also is a carry forward of the same one. What do you think are the technologies pertaining to ship design that an architect should learn in the present day scenario?
I think that's what I have actually tried to define as challenges. Right. Each of them is a challenge, because like starting from the initial concept, the amount of discussions that you have to take with the end user has gone up considerably. The amount of effort that you have to keep in discussing with the vendors. I'm just using a very generic term, but they are, each of them, say you take Wärtsilä, MAN, they're all doing a lot of research and developing constantly. So we as designer, we should know when we, before entering, what are available with us, what all combinations we can work. Say somebody wants to work with ammonia. Okay, what is the engine ready, or where is the status? And it goes to every aspect of design, even the material aspect of design, because there are a lot of work being happening in, say, use of carbon fiber or GRP. It's not that it's there in the industry already, but there are a lot of effort being put. And like as I mentioned, something which is of personally, I feel quite interested about nuclear power, because I feel, I mean, of course, you can all read warship. There are a lot of studies available for warships. 20 years, no engine, no fuel, and 20 years, billions of dollars worth of fuel, and even commercial studies on different container concepts says that probably between 5 and 10 years you can actually cover your cost, initial cost. Then you just operate. You operate with a kind of a grapefruit size uranium will take you through probably 2 generations of ship. So you when the ship is old, you change your ship, not your engine room. So yeah, so that's how the technology is moving very fast, and I think it's a constant learning process for every one of us.
Thank you. The next one is from Rammurthy Nethi. With new fuels like LNG or hydrogen or similar fuels, is electric propulsion better or direct drive?
Uh, it's like this when we look at commercial ship designs, where efficiency, the fuel consumption, the minimum fuel consumption, when you look at your two-stroke engines become the preferred solution. So you there you really don't need a electric propulsion system. You better go for the direct drive. But when you look at noise, for example, and if you're really designing to have a low noise vessel, then you need to mount your engine, because it's one of the major sources of noise generation. Then you can mount the engine much better if it is a 4-stroke engine. So there are even for commercial vessels like bulk carriers, there are now latest concepts from different suppliers and different designs for using 4-stroke engines and electric motor propulsion. But when we did many studies for this kind of vessels, if fuel consumption is your prime target, probably that's still not very attractive. But I think it has to be seen in combination with, when you try to use battery, for example, to some extent, if you want to mix your fuel with conventional fuel or this LNG or any new fuel with certain usage of battery in ports, and then so if you want to combine your usage, and probably electric drive will give you a better flexibility and kind of more control over your usage of power. So I think it's a very project specific thing, but just from fuel, I don't think it is directing towards electric propulsion.
Okay, thank you. The next question is a technical one. How would you come in to an optimized value of block coefficient during design phase without compromising the efficiency and taking into account the crew comfort? Making the ships more slender is a good option, but it puts crew comfort at stake. Your comments on this?
Yeah, it's a block coefficient is kind of it's a generic definition of your say the hull's volume to the rectangular box volume. Okay?
Yeah.
So it varies with kind of ship. So now if this question is pertaining to cargo vessels, the whole idea is it's not a vessel design. Of course, we have to meet certain level of crew comfort, but it is also it's designed and built to transport cargo. So you have to have a balance, and when you design the hull, there are various aspects. So one is definitely how much cargo you want to carry, how much fuel you want to carry, and what kind of other items like fresh water, or so basically how much endurance you should give. And then you reach a required displacement. And once you know the displacement, there are your parameters to control or reduce the displacement are not much. You can try to optimize your hull structure by doing a lot of analysis and things like that, but you really don't have that much flexibility when it comes to a cargo vessel. So you will reach a CB where your target fuel consumption, because whatever we say, many of the sales on vessels happened just by seeing what is your power required for your design speed. So if you see the handysize segment, 2010 to 2020, it was just the fuel consumption which made the project successful. So everybody wanted to have optimum consumption, but without varying. Say if it's a 38K, you somehow you achieve 38K. Then you work with whatever you can do with a lot of application of CFD, which I have explained. It's more flexible now. For example, a few years before, again, it was a manual process. So if I need to try with different bulbous bow forms, for example, we had to do different forms and study. But now we work with a tool called Numerica, where we are kind of in the process of trying out it. But there are a lot of optimization possibilities where multidimensional optimization are possible. So a lot of machine learning and AI is into it, which will give you a form which is kind of optimum with whatever variables you have. So I really don't have a direct answer to say, how do you define? It is you play with all your variables and define what is your mission objective. If it is a car, passenger vessel, and crew comfort is most important, and you don't worry about certain other parts, it's okay. So depending on the type of vessel you work, and you optimize and reach where you have to reach.
Okay, thank you. The next one is about material. What is the scope of insulation, damping materials / flooring solution, particularly on achievement of high strength, low density materials used on modern day shipbuilding?
Okay. There are definitely a lot of scope because of course, again, cargo vessel, you really don't have that much area, but as we see more and more application of say ammonia or methanol, ammonia or LNG, you have actually more usage of this material even on a cargo vessel. Because, for example, if you're keeping your LNG in the aft of the ship, your entire cargo hold aft is to be a 60 insulation. So the amount of insulation that is going on board is more. So if you can have lesser density material, it is better. Now, when we design passenger vessels, and this is something which we have kind of interacted with many vendors who are available, we want to go for whatever is the least weight material with whatever required properties for fire insulation or noise insulation or thermal insulation as applicable. So we feel there is definitely more requirement for lightweight insulation material in the market.
Okay, thanks for that. The next one is something that has been on my mind for a while now. In the past few years, the buzzwords in shipping for a lot of exhibitions and meets were AI, machine learning, and blockchain and other things. Off late, I think a very key word that we keep hearing again and again is the digital twin. So you mentioned that in your presentation. Could you just elaborate on how what a digital twin is and how it can be used in a design state, and then when a vessel is actually developed and operational for the operational efficiency and maintenance of the vessel also?
Sure, I can try to explain the way I understand the topic.
Sure.
Of course, a digital twin, I think in literary meaning, is a twin of an actual operating vessel that's sitting in your office, which can take in feed, which has kind of all the equipment, all the systems modeled in, and which can take in feed from the vessel, and which can kind of simulate scenarios for you in the office, which you can use for making your decisions on various aspects, probably operation, maintenance, all associated aspects for the design, for the project. Now, when it comes to design, what I mentioned was we always start with 3D models. In fact, 10 years before, we wanted to kind of make the design first. So draw certain drawings, to draw maximum drawings and go to 3D model. But now the preference is slowly changing. We want to start with the 3D model so that your clarity of space, clarity of, even aspects like maintenance, your removal. So many things become more clear. Your understanding of weight and weight distribution become more clear. Now, so that process has already been there for quite some time. And now each of these vendors, each of the equipment makers have their own 3D model, which we can incorporate into our 3D model and kind of make this model, what we are working to, a more and more closer to an actual representation of the ship. It's not something which is only designed or only made for generation of, say, production documentation. Normally in a design, when we make 3D model, our purpose is to create, say, generate production documentation or have better control of the design. But now it can go a step forward, like in the defense side also, there are these different IETM catalog levels where you can have, finally it's a full model of the ship that you have, where let's say you go into the 3D model, maybe you can wear a VR glass and you go to the engine area and you have a menu on the side. You click on that, you see, okay, which are the component, or how you remove, for example, how you remove your cylinder head. So there is a video being played or there is an instruction being given. So you can incorporate all these things into this 3D model, which will be a highly valuable asset for the operator for a long term, because if once he can get in the input from the vessel and try to see what is happening in this digital twin of that vessel, then it will give much more control for him on the project.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for indulging me with this. I think with this we finish our Q&A session. Thank